The great hall on Velthara buzzed with alien voices. Creatures from across the galaxy filled the massive chamber. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and many had features that humans would find impossible to describe. The Galactic Council met here every few months to discuss trade, wars, and peace treaties. Elder Vrextal sat in the corner, his old body shaking. The Catherian was over 800 years old. His people lived much longer than most species in the galaxy. They also had strange abilities that others called magic. Vrextal could see things that had not happened yet. Most of the time, the council ignored his warnings. Today felt different. The old alien stood up slowly. His forearms trembled as he walked to the center of the hall. The talking stopped. Even the youngest council members knew to respect the ancient Catherian. "I must speak," Vrextal said. His voice was weak but clear. "I have seen something that will change everything." Council Speaker Yulamoth looked annoyed. The Zentorian had heard many of Vrextal's prophecies before. Most seemed like nonsense. "Elder, we have important business today." "Can this wait?" "No," Vrextal replied firmly. "You must hear this now, before it is too late." In the observer section, Admiral Taman sat quietly. The human diplomat was new to galactic politics. His people had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. Earth was still considered a minor planet by most aliens. Next to him, Commander Sora shifted in her seat. She was a military officer, not used to long meetings. Vrextal's eyes began to glow with a strange light. When Catherians had visions, their bodies changed. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "I have seen the children of Terra," the elder began. "They come from a small blue world at the edge of your maps. You think they are weak? You think they are simple? You are wrong." Some council members laughed. The humans were barely 100 years into their space age. Their ships were slow and their weapons were basic. How could they threaten anyone? "These humans look soft," Vrextal continued. "They have no natural armor, no claws, no poison, no psychic powers, but they have something else, something more dangerous than any weapon." "What?" asked a Drakari representative. "His species was known for their strength and aggression. They never give up," Vrextal said simply. "When you hurt them, they learn. When you break them, they adapt. When you defeat them, they come back stronger. They are the only species I have seen that gets better through suffering." The hall erupted in noise. Many aliens talked at once. The idea seemed crazy. Every intelligent species eventually learned when to surrender. It was basic survival. "Silence," Yulmoth called out. "Elder, please continue." Vrextal's voice grew stronger. "In my visions, I see great wars. I see empires falling. I see the galaxy burning. And always the humans survive. They do not conquer because they want power. They conquer because they must. Because someone pushed them too far." Admiral Taman wrote notes quietly. His face showed no emotion, but Commander Sora noticed his hands were tense. "You speak of the future as if it is certain," said Prime Minister Walthan of the Zentorians. "But the future can be changed." "Some things can be changed," Vrextal agreed. "But not this. The humans carry something in their blood, something ancient. When their world tried to kill them, they survived. When their climate changed, they adapted. When diseases came, they found cures. They are evolution's greatest success." A Vorthan admiral stood up. His people had the strongest military in the galaxy. "Even if this is true, what could one small planet do against us? We have thousands of worlds, millions of ships." Vrextal looked directly at the Vorthan. "Your ships follow rules. Your tactics are predictable. Your soldiers know when to retreat. Humans do not think like you. They will use things as weapons that you never considered. They will fight in ways that make no sense, and they will never ever stop learning from their mistakes." The laughter died down. Something in the old Catherian's voice made even the skeptics listen. "I have seen human children playing," Vrextal said softly. "They create games where they pretend to fight monsters. They always win in these games. Not because they are stronger, but because they find the monster's weakness. Then they find another way. Then another. They never accept that something cannot be defeated." Council Speaker Yulmoth tried to restore order. "Elder, we appreciate your concerns. But humans are our allies. They seek peace, not war." "Yes," Vrextal nodded. "They do seek peace. That is what makes them so dangerous. They do not want to fight. But when someone forces them to fight, they become something else. Something terrible." The meeting continued for hours. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were settled. But many council members kept thinking about the old Catherian's words. As the session ended, Vrextal moved slowly toward the human section. Admiral Taman stood as the elder approached. "Your people seem peaceful," Vrextal said quietly. "I hope they can stay that way." "We try to avoid conflict," Taman replied carefully. Vrextal's ancient eyes studied the human's face. "I know you do, but conflict will find you anyway. It always does. When it comes, remember what I said today. Your people carry the spark of something ancient and terrible. Pray that the galaxy never gives you reason to ignite it." Commander Sora stepped forward. "What exactly are you warning us about?" "I am not warning you," Vrextal said with a sad smile. "I am warning them." He gestured to the other council members who were leaving the hall. "You will survive whatever comes. You always do. The question is whether they will survive you." The old Catherian walked away slowly. His prophecy hung in the air like a storm cloud. Admiral Taman and Commander Sora stood in silence for a long moment. "Do you think he's right?" Sora asked quietly. Taman looked around the great hall. Representatives from dozens of species were talking and laughing. They looked so confident, so sure of their place in the galaxy. "I hope not," he said finally, "but we should be ready just in case." Outside the hall, ships prepared to carry the news across the galaxy. Most would report on trade deals and political agreements. Few would mention the old Catherian's warning about humans. That would turn out to be a mistake. Dr. Jiwoo floated in the zero-gravity lab studying an alien artifact. The object was covered in symbols that no one could read. It had been found on a dead planet 6 months ago. The Zentorian research team had tried everything to understand it. "Have you made any progress?" asked Research Director Kelmara. The Zentorian scientist had 6 arms and a methodical way of thinking. Her species followed strict scientific rules that had worked for thousands of years. Jiwoo smiled and held up a small device. "I think I found something. Look at this." She pressed the device against the artifact. The symbols began to glow. Suddenly, the object opened like a flower. Inside was a small crystal that pulsed with light. Kelmara's eyes widened. "How did you do that?" "We tried every scanning method in our database. I used a sound frequency," Jiwoo explained. "I noticed the symbols had different depths. I thought maybe they responded to vibrations instead of light or heat. But that is not in any protocol," Kelmara said, confused. "How did you know to try it?" Jiwoo shrugged. "I didn't know. I just guessed. Sometimes you have to try things that don't make sense." This kind of thinking amazed the Zentorians. Their science was based on careful steps and proven methods. The idea of just guessing seemed wrong to them. But somehow the humans' wild ideas kept working. Meanwhile, in Drakari space, General Korthvek studied reports about the humans. His species was preparing for expansion. They needed new worlds and resources. The human colonies looked like easy targets. "What do our scouts say?" he asked his aide. "The humans are weak," the aide reported. "They have few warships. Their weapons are primitive. Most of their colonies are barely defended." Korthvex nodded. The Drakari had conquered dozens of species. Humans would be no different. Begin Phase 1. Attack their outer settlements. Make them afraid. The first Drakari raids targeted human cargo ships and mining stations. They expected quick surrenders and easy victories. Instead, they found something unexpected. Captain Insu commanded a merchant vessel called the New Dawn. His ship carried farming equipment to a human colony. It was not a warship. It had only basic shields and no real weapons. When 3 Drakari raiders appeared, Insu's crew should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they did something that made no sense. "All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers," Insu announced calmly. "Captain," said his engineer, "we can't fight military ships with a cargo hauler." "We're not going to fight them," Insu replied. "We're going to confuse them." The Drakari expected the human ship to run or surrender. Instead, the New Dawn began moving in strange patterns. It released its cargo pods in a specific formation. Then it used its mining lasers in ways they were never designed for. The cargo pods exploded in sequence, creating a debris field. The mining lasers, normally used to cut rocks, were focused into tight beams. The Drakari ships found themselves flying through a maze of obstacles while being hit by precise laser strikes. One raider was damaged when debris punctured its hull. Another lost navigation when laser fire disrupted its sensors. The third raider tried to retreat but crashed into a floating cargo container. Within an hour, Captain Insu's crew had captured 2 Drakari ships and disabled the third. They used spare parts from their farming equipment to jury-rig weapons and tools that shouldn't have worked. General Korthvex read the report 3 times. How does a cargo ship defeat 3 raiders? The humans used their cargo as weapons, his aide explained. They turned mining equipment into military tools. They fought like nothing we have seen before. It was luck, Korthvex decided. One lucky ship, Captain. Continue the raids, but the reports kept coming. Human ships that should have been easy targets kept fighting back in impossible ways. They used their ships' features in ways their designers never intended. They combined civilian technology with military tactics. They made weapons out of tools and tools out of weapons. Dr. Jiwoo continued her work on the research station. Her latest discovery was even more impressive. She had figured out how to use the alien crystal to power human technology. The combination created new possibilities that excited and worried her Zentorian colleagues. This should not work, Kilmara said, watching the hybrid device in action. Human and alien technology are completely different. Maybe that's why it works, Jiwoo suggested. We think differently. We use things differently. Sometimes different is better. The Zentorians began to understand something about humans. They didn't just learn alien science. They changed it. They combined it with their own ideas to create something new. This was not how most species worked. Captain Insu returned to Earth as a hero. His success inspired other human captains. They began sharing their improvised tactics and modified equipment. What started as one lucky encounter became a pattern of human innovation. The Drakari noticed this pattern too. Their easy raids were becoming costly battles. Human merchants and miners were fighting like soldiers. Worse, they were winning. Sir, an aide reported to General Korthvex, we have lost 12 ships in the last month, all to civilian human vessels. Korthvex slammed his fist on the table. How is this possible? They are not warriors. Our analysts think the humans are learning from each encounter, the aide said carefully. They study our tactics and adapt. Each human ship we fight uses new methods. Then we will use overwhelming force, Korthvex declared. No more small raids. We will invade their colonies directly. They cannot adapt fast enough to stop a full military assault. He was wrong about that, but he wouldn't learn the truth until it was too late. Dr. Jiwoo received a message from Earth. The government wanted her to return home immediately. Her research was needed for something important. She didn't know it yet, but her work with alien technology would soon become crucial for humanity's survival. As she packed her equipment, Kelmara approached her. I will miss working with you, the Zentorian scientist said. You have taught us much about thinking differently. I learned a lot too, Jiwoo replied. Maybe someday we can work together again. I hope so, Kelmara said. But privately she worried. The reports from Drakari space were troubling. If war came, would the peaceful human scientist become something else? Would she use her knowledge of alien technology for darker purposes? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The morning sky over New Seoul burned red as Drakari ships filled the air. Governor Hyojin stood at her office window, watching the invasion fleet descend like metal vultures. Her hands were steady as she activated the emergency broadcast system. This is Governor Hyojin to all citizens, she announced. We are under attack. Execute Evacuation Plan Delta immediately. This is not a drill. Across the colony, people moved with practiced efficiency. New Seoul had been preparing for this day since the first Drakari raids began. Children knew where to go. Adults knew what to take. Everyone knew their job. Colonel Dong-hyun ran through the military command center coordinating the defense. His forces were small. Only 3,000 soldiers to defend a colony of 50,000 people. The Drakari had brought 20 ships and 10,000 troops. Sir, they're demanding our surrender, reported Lieutenant Yujin. Send back our standard response, Dong-hyun replied calmly. The lieutenant smiled grimly and transmitted a single word. No. War Chief Grathkar studied the human colony from his flagship. The settlement looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Most species would be panicking by now. Instead, the humans seemed to be following some kind of plan. Begin the assault, he ordered. Show them what happens when they refuse Drakari generosity. The first wave of Drakari soldiers landed expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found empty buildings and quiet streets. The humans had vanished like ghosts. Where are they? Demanded Captain Vokhtar as his troops searched the main city. The answer came in the form of explosions. Buildings that seemed empty suddenly erupted in fire and smoke. Streets that looked clear became deadly traps. The humans had turned their entire colony into a weapon. Xian-Ho crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping center. The former engineer had volunteered to stay behind when the civilians evacuated. Now he and 200 other volunteers were making the DraKari pay for every street. "Timer set," whispered Ara, a teacher who had become expert with explosives. "When they enter the school, the whole building comes down." Xian-Ho nodded. They had rigged dozens of buildings with improvised bombs made from mining charges and farming chemicals. The DraKari would find nothing but empty ruins that exploded when they got too close. War Chief Grathkar grew frustrated as reports flooded in. His forces controlled the city, but they controlled nothing. The humans had taken everything valuable and booby-trapped everything else. "Find their leaders," he commanded. "Bring me prisoners to interrogate." But the humans refused to be captured. When cornered, they fought with desperate creativity. A group of teenagers used modified farm vehicles to ram DraKari positions. A grandmother turned her kitchen into a chemical weapons factory. A librarian used his knowledge of the colony's layout to guide ambush attacks. Colonel Dong-hyun coordinated the resistance from a hidden bunker in the mountains. His soldiers had retreated in good order, taking their heavy weapons with them. Now they struck at DraKari patrols and supply lines. "Report," he said to Scout Leader Minho. 50 DraKari casualties today," Minho replied. "They're getting nervous. They're shooting at shadows." "Good, fear makes them careless. Careless enemies make mistakes." The DraKari had conquered many worlds. They knew how occupation was supposed to work. You defeated the enemy army, captured the leaders, and the population surrendered. But the humans didn't follow these rules. Instead of surrendering, civilian engineers like Xian-Ho studied captured DraKari equipment. They learned how alien technology worked, then found ways to break it. Soon, DraKari vehicles began breaking down mysteriously. Their communication systems suffered strange malfunctions. Their weapons jammed at crucial moments. "How are they doing this?" Grathkar demanded of his technical officer. "They're using our own technology against us," the officer reported. "Somehow they've learned to hack our systems. They're turning our equipment into their weapons." This was impossible. Most species took decades to understand alien technology. The humans had been doing it in weeks. Governor He-jin broadcast messages from her hidden location. Her words reached not just New Seoul but human colonies across the galaxy. "We are still here," she announced. "We are still fighting. They have our city, but they do not have us. They never will have us." Her broadcasts inspired other human worlds. When DraKari forces attacked the mining colony on Jeojin, they found the humans ready. The miners had turned their tunnels into fortresses and their excavation equipment into weapons. The farming world of Daihan became a nightmare for DraKari troops. The humans used their knowledge of agriculture to create biological weapons that targeted alien biology, while leaving human crops untouched. Each human world that fought back taught the other something new. They shared tactics through hidden communication networks. They adapted DraKari technology for human use. They learned from every defeat and improved with every victory. War Chief Grathkar sent increasingly desperate reports to his superiors. "These humans are not like other species," he warned. "They do not know when they are beaten. Every day we occupy their worlds, they become more dangerous." The DraKari High Command dismissed his concerns. How could one small species threaten their empire? They ordered Grathkar to continue the invasion. But the war chief was beginning to understand something that Elder Vrextile had tried to warn the galaxy about. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were learning, and everything they learned made them harder to defeat. Xian-Ho and his team had moved beyond simple sabotage. They were now building new weapons from captured DraKari technology and human ingenuity. Their latest creation was a device that could disable DraKari shields using modified farming drones. "It shouldn't work," Ara said, looking at their improvised weapon. The DraKari designed their shields to stop military weapons. But they didn't design them to stop fertilizer applicators flying in swarm patterns, Xian-Ho replied, with a grim smile. "Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never thought of." The resistance was growing stronger every day. More importantly, it was growing smarter. The humans were becoming something the Drakari had never faced before, an enemy that improved through suffering. In his mountain bunker, Colonel Dong Hyun received a coded message from Earth. Human fleet units were being assembled. Help was coming, but he knew that by the time it arrived, his people would have changed. They had been farmers, teachers, engineers, and shopkeepers. The Drakari invasion was turning them into something else. Something harder. Something more dangerous, something that would not forgive, and would not forget. Ambassador Nari stood before the Galactic Council emergency session. The Great Hall buzzed with nervous energy. News from human space had reached every corner of the galaxy. What had started as a simple Drakari expansion had become something much larger. Honored representatives, Nari began, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. I come to answer your questions about the ongoing conflict. Council Speaker Yulmoth leaned forward. Ambassador, we have received disturbing reports. The Drakari claim your people are using illegal weapons and unconventional tactics. Nari smiled coldly. The Drakari invaded our colonies without warning. They killed our civilians. They destroyed our homes. We are defending ourselves with whatever means necessary. But some of your methods, Yulmoth hesitated. They violate accepted rules of warfare. Whose rules? Nari asked. We never agreed to fight by Drakari rules. We will fight by human rules. And our first rule is simple. We protect our people. In the Zentarian capital, Prime Minister Walden studied classified reports with growing alarm. Intelligence analyst Myung-Soo had compiled data from across human space. The picture it painted was frightening. Show me the technical analysis, Walden requested. Myung-Soo activated a holographic display. Human forces are adapting at an unprecedented rate. Each engagement teaches them something new. They're reverse engineering Drakari technology and improving it. Improving it? Walden asked. Yes, sir. A captured human weapon was 30% more efficient than the original Drakari design. They took alien technology and made it better in 3 weeks. This was impossible by normal standards. Most species needed years to understand alien technology. Humans were mastering it in days. On the Catherian homeworld, Fleet Admiral Vexamora ran her 100th simulation. Her computers showed the same result every time. Human tactics should not work. Yet they did work, and they worked consistently. Admiral, her aide reported, we have new data from the Drakari front. Vexamora studied the latest battle reports. A human mining colony with no military training had held off a Drakari assault force for 6 months. They had turned rock-cutting equipment into artillery. They had used their knowledge of geology to create tunnel systems that confounded enemy sensors. How? She muttered. How does a mining engineer become a military genius in 6 months? The answer lay in something the Catherians were only beginning to understand. Humans didn't just learn from their own mistakes. They learned from everyone's mistakes. Each human colony that fought back shared its knowledge with all the others. Dr. Yoon Young, a human xenopsychologist, published a research paper that spread throughout the galaxy. It was titled Adaptive Response Patterns in Human Stress Situations. The paper described how humans reacted to threats differently than other species. Most sapient species have built-in limitations, she wrote. When facing impossible odds, they retreat or surrender. This is logical survival behavior. Humans appear to lack this limitation. Instead of retreating from impossible situations, they find ways to make them possible. The paper included case studies from New Seoul. It showed how human civilians had transformed themselves into effective resistance fighters in weeks. It documented how they had learned to use Drakari technology better than the Drakari themselves. Elder Vrextal's prophecies were no longer dismissed as ramblings. Council members who had laughed at his warnings now requested private meetings. They wanted to know what else he had seen. You were right about the humans, admitted Admiral Zekthorn of the Vorthons. What else should we know? Vrextal's ancient eyes were sad. This is only the beginning. The humans have not yet shown their true strength. The Drakari think they are fighting a colony war. They do not understand they are fighting for the humans' survival. When humans fight for survival, they become unstoppable. Meanwhile, Emperor Draxmal of the Drakari Empire grew furious with each report. His simple expansion had become a costly war. Worse, it was a war he seemed to be losing. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 47 capital ships and over 200 smaller vessels, his aide reported quietly. Against a species that barely has a space navy? Sir, they don't fight ship-to-ship battles. They use tactics we've never seen. They turn asteroids into weapons. They hide bombs in cargo containers. They attack our supply lines with converted civilian ships. The Emperor's rage grew. The Drakari were proud of their military tradition. They had conquered dozens of worlds using superior firepower and disciplined tactics. But the humans fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Captain Bitna led a special operations team on the occupied world of New Sol. Her mission was to gather intelligence on Drakari positions. But she and her team had been doing much more than that. Target acquired, she whispered into her communicator. Drakari command post, grid reference 77 Alpha. What followed was not a traditional assault. Bitna's team had spent months learning Drakari habits and weaknesses. They knew when the guards changed shifts. They knew which officers were afraid of the dark. They knew exactly how to create maximum chaos with minimum resources. The command post exploded at precisely 300 hours. The explosion was designed to look like an equipment malfunction. By the time the Drakari figured out it was sabotage, Bitna's team was gone. Ghost tactics, the Drakari called it. The humans appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished completely. They left no trace except destruction and fear. Intelligence analyst Myung-soo updated his reports daily. Each update showed the same pattern: humans learning, adapting, improving. But his latest discovery was the most disturbing. They're not just defending anymore, he told Prime Minister Walthan. Human forces have begun launching counterattacks into Drakari space. Counterattacks? Walthan was surprised, but they're still outnumbered 10 to 1. Numbers don't seem to matter to them, Myung-soo replied. They're using asymmetric warfare. They strike at key targets, disrupt supply lines, and retreat before the Drakari can respond. They're fighting smart, not hard. The galaxy watched in amazement as human forces pushed deeper into Drakari territory. They didn't try to hold ground or conquer planets. Instead, they systematically destroyed military infrastructure and freed captured civilians. Ambassador Nari faced another emergency council session. This time the questions were different. Ambassador, said a Vorthan representative, your forces have crossed into Drakari space. Are you planning to conquer their empire? We're planning to end their ability to threaten anyone, Nari replied simply. When they can no longer attack innocent colonies, we will stop. And if they surrender, then they will be treated with mercy. Humans do not enjoy war. We simply refuse to lose. Elder Vrextal watched the proceedings from his corner. His prophecy was coming true exactly as he had foreseen. The humans were reshaping the galaxy, one battle at a time. The old Catherian knew what came next. Soon the galaxy would have to decide whether humanity was a threat to be feared or an ally to be courted. Either way, the age of underestimating humans was over. Admiral Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the battleship New Sol's Revenge, watching his fleet prepare for the final assault. 18 months of brutal war had led to this moment. The liberation of the colony world would begin in 6 hours. His ships looked nothing like they had when the war started. Human engineers had rebuilt them using captured Drakari technology and human innovation. The results horrified alien observers. Vessels that should not exist, armed with weapons that should not work. Fleet status report, Jae-sung requested. All ships ready, Admiral, replied Captain Sujin. The Drakari don't know we're here yet. Below on New Sol, General Young-mi coordinated with the resistance fighters who had survived 18 months of occupation. They were no longer the farmers and shopkeepers who had first faced invasion. War had transformed them into something harder and more dangerous. Phoenix Team report, she said into her communicator. Captain Bitna's voice crackled back from inside the occupied city. In position, General. Local resistance confirms Drakari positions. They're exactly where we expected. That was the key advantage humans had developed. They understood their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. 18 months of studying Drakari behavior had revealed patterns and weaknesses that the aliens didn't even know they had. Emperor Draxmol paced in his war room, studying maps of the conflict. The situation had grown worse every week. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare that consumed resources and ships. Status of our New Sol garrison? He demanded. Still holding the main cities, reported General Korthvex via communication link. But we've lost contact with 17 outposts this week. The humans appear and disappear like phantoms. How many phantoms can one small colony have? Sir, our intelligence suggests every human civilian has become a potential combatant. They've trained children to plant explosives and elderly citizens to gather intelligence. We're not fighting an army. We're fighting an entire population. This violated everything the Drakari understood about warfare. Civilians were supposed to be helpless. They were supposed to surrender when their military was defeated. But human civilians had become more dangerous than many professional soldiers. Sion Ho crouched in the ruins of his former engineering office, making final preparations. The device in his hands was his masterpiece, a weapon built from farming equipment, mining tools, and captured Drakari technology. It would disable enemy shields in a 6-block radius. Ready? Asked Ara, who now commanded a squad of improvised fighters. Almost, Sion Ho replied, connecting the final wire. When the fleet arrives, we'll give them a clear path to the Drakari command center. The transformation of ordinary humans into effective warriors amazed galactic observers. These people had no military training, yet they had developed tactics that professional soldiers envied. Admiral Jae-sung checked his chronometer. Begin the assault. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Sol system. Drakari sensors detected them immediately, but what they saw made no sense. Sir, reported the Drakari sensor operator, the human ships are broadcasting surrender requests. War Chief Grathkar was confused. They're asking us to surrender? Yes, sir. They're offering terms for our peaceful withdrawal. Grathkar laughed bitterly. The humans were outnumbered 3-1. Their offer was ridiculous. Tell them to prepare for destruction. What happened next became a case study in human warfare. The human fleet didn't charge into battle like most species. Instead, they used tactics that seemed impossible. Captain Bitna's special forces struck first. They had spent months infiltrating Drakari positions, learning guard rotations and security procedures. When the space battle began, ground-based defenses mysteriously began malfunctioning. Sion Ho activated his improvised weapon. Drakari shields flickered and failed across 6 city blocks. Suddenly, the orbital defense grid had huge gaps in its coverage. General Young Mi's ground forces emerged from hidden positions. They had been preparing for this moment for 18 months. Every building, every street, every piece of terrain had been studied and planned for. The Drakari found themselves fighting on 2 fronts simultaneously. In space, human ships used unconventional tactics that violated standard military doctrine. On the ground, human forces struck with surgical precision at targets that had been carefully chosen for maximum effect. How are they coordinating this? Grathkar demanded as his defenses crumbled. Sir, they seem to know our positions better than we do, his aide reported. They're hitting weak points we didn't know existed. Admiral Jae-sung watched the battle unfold according to plan. His ships moved in patterns that confused Drakari targeting systems. They used captured alien technology in ways its designers never intended. Most importantly, they fought with a unity of purpose that their enemies couldn't match. Drakari flagship is requesting terms, reported Captain Soo-jin. Tell them the same terms we offered before the battle, Jae-sung replied. Complete withdrawal from human space. But the humans had learned something important during 18 months of war. They had learned that mercy without strength was useless. They would offer their enemies a choice, but they would make sure their enemies understood the consequences of choosing poorly. The battle for New Sol lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Drakari garrison had been completely defeated. But the humans didn't stop there. Pursue the fleeing ships, ordered Admiral Jae-sung. They need to understand that this war is over. This was the moment that shocked the galaxy. Most species would have been satisfied with victory. They would have reclaimed their territory and celebrated. But the humans had a different understanding of victory. Captain Bitna led her forces in capturing the Drakari command center. War Chief Grathkar was found hiding in a supply closet, his proud military bearing broken by months of fighting an enemy he couldn't understand. Why? He asked as human soldiers secured the building. Why didn't you surrender when you should have? Bitna looked at the defeated alien commander with something that might have been pity. Because we don't know how to surrender. We only know how to win. The human fleet pursued retreating Drakari forces deep into alien space. They didn't come as conquerors. They came as exterminators of a threat. Every Drakari military base was systematically destroyed. Every weapons factory was reduced to rubble. Every ship that refused to surrender was eliminated. Emperor Draxmal watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across Drakari space. Human forces were everywhere, striking with devastating efficiency. "How many humans are there?" he asked desperately. "Sir, our intelligence estimates suggest they have fewer ships than us," his aide reported. "But they're using them more effectively. They strike at multiple targets simultaneously, then disappear before we can respond." "Then how are they winning?" The aide hesitated before answering. "Sir, I believe they're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to make sure we can never threaten anyone again." This was the human way of war. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought to solve problems permanently, and the Drakari Empire had become a problem that needed solving. General Young Mi stood in the ruins of New Seoul's Capitol building, now flying human colors again. Around her, citizens emerged from hiding places they had called home for 18 months. Children who had learned to make explosives were learning to play again. Adults who had become expert guerrilla fighters were returning to their normal jobs, but they would never be the same. The galaxy had forced them to become something harder, and they would not forget the lesson. "Governor Hee-jin sends her regards," reported Colonel Dong-hyun. "She'll return to take up her duties next week." Young Mai nodded. The political leaders could handle reconstruction. The military had other work to do. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We have more Drakari positions to neutralize." The war was far from over. But the tide had turned completely. The galaxy was learning what Elder Vrextal had tried to warn them about. Humans were the one species that got stronger through suffering, and they had suffered enough.